This week, members of the Ohio State football team making news off the field as leading voices for their faith. Meanwhile, the National Guard in Idaho moves in the opposite direction, punishing an officer for his Christian beliefs. And a detransitioner warns of the dangers of pushing transgenderism inside their community's public schools. These stories and plenty more on deck this week with The Lion Week in Review. Welcome into this week's edition of The Lion Week in Review. It's a weekly look at the culture, the courts, your state capitol, and your kids. I'm Chris Stegall. Now let's meet our panel this week, some of the men and women behind the stories at ReadLion.com. Josh Mann, managing editor. Adam Wittenberg, brand new member to the panel, staff writer at The Lion, and Valerie Cabana, our media contributor here at The Lion. Welcome, panel, as we dive in this week. And Adam, we start with you as the newest member to the team on a great story about Schoolbox here at the Herzog Foundation. People may not know a lot about the program, but I wanted to introduce it to folks, and you've written a story about it.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Schoolbox is a really dynamic, really user-friendly, but super potent way that just about anyone can plant a Christian school. And so one of the missions of the Herzog Foundation is to promote Christian education. And about 2 years ago, the foundation did a bunch of research and came up with 8 key steps to successfully launch a Christian school. And they packaged that into a box. They call it Schoolbox, into one course. Has 8 modules or 8 segments. And this would guide just about anyone through how to set your vision, your mission, what's your target audience, how to find a building, and then even little things like how to be legally incorporated, how to get insurance, how to attract teachers, just all the different steps. And this was based on research.
You know, Valerie, this is a story, this Schoolbox program that Adam has written about is something that in the course of running into different administrators and teachers from Christian schools, the thing the foundation here at the Herzog Foundation does, bring these schools together and they can not only learn from Schoolbox, but from one another best practices. And we've heard that time and again. I know you've covered that on social media too. Yeah,
so just recently this summer, we actually got to have our Schoolbox leaders out for a gathering where they got to connect with each other, bounce ideas off of one another. And I'm super excited to say that we actually did the math this morning, and around 5,096 students are impacted this year alone by Schoolbox.
Wow. Wow, that's awesome. So, yeah, do check it out. I couldn't commend it to you more, and I'm glad. I hope you'll read the story Adam wrote, because if you've thought about starting your own Christian school or you think your community needs one, Schoolbox at herzogfoundation.com is a great place to start. Josh, we turn to the story this week of a detransitioner in Texas petitioning a school board to get rid of the notion of gender fluidity as a curriculum. Talk about it.
Yeah, Emily Schmidt is a young lady who at one point wanted to become a boy, especially during her teenage years, and then has detransitioned and fully embraced her womanhood. And so she has a really powerful story, and she shared that with the Katy Independent School District Board in Texas. And she basically said, that she was groomed to be trans by the district. She said the school, not this district, but a different Texas district. And she says, my school had a huge part of this. Why do you want to teach children that self-hatred is normal? She became suicidal at one point and talks about her mental health struggles. And it really began with a TV show that was introducing her to some ideas. And then she was online on kind of a fan page and really found a dark place on the web where people were helping adults, were helping minors transition and even concoct hormone therapies, what they call bathtub hormones, because they couldn't get the prescriptions otherwise. And so, you know, it's an eye-opening experience and story from a young lady who said there were a number of things that sort of aided and abetted her in this decision she now really regrets. And one of those things was also the school policies that were allowing some of this to happen.
You know, Adam, I can't speak to the psychological nature of this, but I do know that it's psychological, and I don't think anybody can argue that. And so I would just ask, is any teacher, does any educator, private school, public school, does any educator go into their field as an armchair psychologist for something this serious?
I would think not. I'm not intimately familiar with what schools of education nowadays are teaching, but teachers should be focused on reading, writing, arithmetic, and all their subject matter. And I've seen, like in nursing and in other fields, the further we get away from that and try to turn people into counselors, into healers, into things that they're not, the more off we go.
Valerie, it seems like Europe, we've talked about this on previous shows, Europe, some medical associations, not enough in my opinion, but many European organizations and governments have said, we're getting away from this. We're behind the eight ball on it here in the United States, clearly.
Yeah, and one thing that a medical organization has actually come out and said is that social affirmation, puberty blockers, masculizing or feminizing hormones, and surgeries do not appear to improve long-term mental health of adolescents, including suicide risk. And so as time passes, more studies are coming out and saying, hey, actually, you guys are wrong. My question is, when are people going to pick up on it?
These are the kind of cultural stories you'll find, and many more like it at readline.com. Like this story, Adam, of the Idaho National Guard officer who just lost a job over faith, which is almost unbelievable. I'd love to hear more on that.
Yeah, it's a really tragic story. A gentleman with a 20-year track record of service was in a leadership role, and he was running for political office outside of his National Guard duties and posting on Facebook things about, hey, I believe children are born with a gender that they are to keep, or I oppose sex change and mutilation surgeries, or I don't think we should have drag shows in libraries. A lot of views that a lot of people have expressed. Now, once this got out publicly, a member of the Guard who was under his command, who was in the LGBT lifestyle, filed a complaint and said, I believe because of this man's views, I'm being discriminated against. So the Guard did an investigation, removed this gentleman with a 20-year track record from his post, and pressured him into resigning after 20 years of service.
Wow. Josh, I don't know that I've heard a story quite like this, that blatant, that overt, that clearly someone's just speech effectively cost them their military placement.
Yeah, that's right. And so he's got some legal representation who's issued a warning letter saying that his command post should be reinstituted, and a letter was written to the governor saying he needs to act as the state's commander-in-chief, immediately. And so we'll see what happens in this case, but it is unique, and yet it is another one of these stories about religious liberty that we've been seeing, and we're starting to see the courts weigh in on some of these issues, and hopefully it doesn't get to that point. Hopefully they'll restore him and respect his First Amendment rights to express his Christian faith. Certainly, I think that's the American way.
Could I just pipe in here? There's also something really disturbing in the investigative report on this issue. The investigator actually recommended no Christians as commanders.
Wow.
As one of the outcomes of this investigation. And what's really happening here is this is that chilling effect. If you speak up, if you put your views out there, we're coming for you. We'll take your job, we'll take your privilege, and it will affect. It's a ripple effect. I mean, that's like when they kind of hold someone up as an example and they punish them more severely to kind of chill. And we're not going to put Christians in this role anymore. And again, this guy had a 20-year track record, and now it's all in jeopardy. I mean, he is fighting in court because of his comments.
Valerie, you work in social media as well as the show here, and one of the things that is just the last week has happened. We talked about Mark Zuckerberg last week saying that, yes, the official United States government pressured him to silence certain points of view on COVID. We know Elon Musk now is in a battle with the nation of Brazil. They've literally taken X as a platform away from Brazilians. In the UK, similarly, and in Europe, there are discussions of people just praying silently and their speech. This is a major international issue, really.
Yeah, this lady, she was simply standing and praying silently outside of an abortion clinic, and she was arrested twice for it. And at one point, the clinic wasn't even open, and she stated that she was shocked to find that she might have been seen as intimidating, and said that she was just there to offer her support. And I applaud her for that, because so many women that are in that situation, they're not doing it because they want to. They're doing it because they feel like they have to. And so being able to be there and offer support and maybe offer some different options could make that mother a mother and give her the opportunity to have that baby. And so to take that opportunity away, and then to arrest the woman for being there. So she did win a $17,000 settlement. She won the case, but I don't think $17,000 is enough. You affected her personhood. You took her to jail. You arrested her twice for doing what? She wasn't committing a crime. And you know, just to support other mothers, other women who are very obviously going through a lot. Yeah.
I think a lot about the politics today, and of course we're talking about a presidential election coming. I'll go around the horn, Adam, and I ask, are you bullish or bearish on the state of free speech in the United States? Are people too inclined to think speech they disagree with ought to be silenced, or culturally are we waking up to realize this is an extraordinarily slippery slope we're sliding down quickly?
Yeah, well, I definitely think people are way too inclined. And I'm recalling that in my growing up, they did a tour of the U.S. Constitution, and I might have been 10, 11, 12 years old. And at the time, I wasn't that impressed, but I did get to go see it. It came to all 50 states, and my school did a field trip, Christian school, by the way. And at the time, I was like, what is this stuff? You know, I don't care about this. But boy, is it ever more important. But I am afraid that as the dumbing down of standards and education, and kids are failing, schools are failing to teach basic American rights and things that should be, every American should just know now, and couple that with the trends in society and social media, the cancel culture, it's way out of control.
And to Adam's point, Josh, free speech is a natural right. Natural rights are gifts from God. It seems to me, obviously we know culturally there's a great assault on, I guess, the very concept of natural rights. So if you can assault that, it would make sense you could assault the concept of free speech.
That's right. And I think Christians across the nation ought to be concerned about the First Amendment right that they have, and every other religious person or a non-religious person has. And I think it is a huge issue. I think it is on the ballot essentially in the presidential election, because we've seen very different approaches to First Amendment issues, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, from the candidates who are running. And so people need to be very concerned about this. I mean, the lady in the UK was an example where she's praying silently. You'll remember Kennedy, Coach Kennedy, who was also, his case ended up in the Supreme Court. He was fired for silently praying in the middle of a football field. So it's not just something happening in other places. I think that First Amendment right is under attack here, and it is vital that we realize its significance and continue to fight to protect it.
Valerie, you come from what I think is called Gen Z by definition. So is the Gen Z generation aware of the threat to free speech, or are they cheering what some of us would interpret as threats to free speech?
Unfortunately, I think my generation has a lot to do with the issue, and what I'm seeing is a culture of offense. And we are seeing people, they're raised in a way of being offended by so many different topics. If you don't agree with me, then I'm going to try to cancel you. I'm offended by you, so that means I should try to cancel you. I grew up in a household where if I didn't agree with something or if I didn't like something, I was told to suck it up. And I think that we need a lot more suck it up culture in America today to get back on track.
And, you know, that is a perfect segue to the very final story that we're going to cover this week. And, Josh, it's the story of Ohio State football players. Football is still a sport largely where the guys are told, suck it up. But what I love about this story, and it seems athletics are often where we find people proclaiming their love of the Lord most boldly. And that's the story here.
That's right. And the good news is this is one area where, you know, sometimes reporters or TV broadcasts will cut away a little soon. But for the most part, I think it's pretty accepted still. Hey, these athletes are going to give credit to the Lord in many cases. And the thing that's intriguing to me about this Ohio State story is there seems to be a revival of sorts happening around colleges in the United States, certainly, maybe elsewhere, I don't know. But here in Ohio State, a number of football players have been very active in their faith, even earlier this year, talking about sharing the gospel with their fellow teammates. Then we saw some baptisms being done about a month ago. And this latest event, it was a rally where 800 to 1,000 students attended. It was largely led by football players who spoke about their Christian faith. Some 60 students were also baptized. And so we're seeing a movement on campuses and young people who are realizing why they're here on earth and what they're here for. And so it's wonderful to see, and I hope it continues to spread across the nation.
Yeah, it's a positive story, Adam, in that I think athletes and winning sports programs, or people that are dominant in a particular sport, as they always say, winning cures all, but I suppose winning also provides a bit of a cultural shield to be able to say what you want when you're not playing, as long as you're playing. People seem to respect sports in a way, and oddly, all of a sudden, culturally, you wonder, is it sports that's going to bring a revival back to the country?
Yeah, well, it certainly hopes so. I think it's good that people are stepping up and out. I mean, this is very heartening, and we had a story within the last month of a bunch of, I think it was 20 or more of these football players at Ohio State showing up wearing shirts, Jesus is Lord, or all about God and such. So I love your point, and I certainly do hope that as more and more athletes speak up. And I think it's a call for all people, though, to become more bold. You don't have to be a pro athlete or a college athlete. You can step up now. Voices are needed.
Mallory, you come from that scene in college, right? You cheered and saw athletics. Athletics has always kind of been that untouchable, which is interesting, and they seem to be using that leverage.
Yeah, I think Christianity is a part of culture in sports. My husband, he played football in college. He talks about it. And, I think this Ohio State football story is an example, a perfect example of how a few people can make a big difference. And so often we're sitting in what we believe to be the silent majority. But what we can see is that a few people can make a big difference.
And wearing your Chiefs jersey this week, too, by the way. Couldn't help but
Chiefs.
notice. All right, before we wrap up this week, we always like to go around the horn and ask the panel their favorite story of the week, one that they'd like to call your attention to at readlion.com. Adam, we start with you.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Schoolbox. Over 260 schools launched in just the last 2 years, many more in the works, thousands, 5,000 or more students impacted. And you can do it too. Your church, you and just another parent or an educator, it doesn't take that much. We'll coach you, we'll help you, and it's inspiring to read.
Valerie, what do you like?
So the headline is Prominent Women Leaving Democratic Party Over Education. And this is huge. We've seen it happen over the course of the last year and even beyond that, but more and more people are starting to realize that this is the common sense option.
Josh Mann, your favorite this week.
Well, I don't love it because it's a hard story, but this detransitioner who spoke to the Texas School Board, I credit her for her boldness. I think we need to listen to these people who experienced gender dysphoria and then came out the other side and said, look, I made decisions I regretted. These people have a lot at stake. They're losing their former LGBTQ community when they leave that. And yet they're not fully accepted, it seems. So they have a lot at stake, and that's why we need to listen to them and hear why they regretted it, what led to their decision. And so kudos to Emily Schmidt in Texas.
Good stuff. Panel, thank you. Adam, welcome aboard. Good to have you. And that is going to do it for this week's edition of the Lion Week in Review. Be sure to keep up to date on all the latest stories every day at readlion.com. They're constantly refreshing them there. And for all of us at the Lion, until next time, thanks for downloading the show.